and Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome back to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Greg Oram, and with me, of course, is my podcast partner, Richard Spray. Today, we turn our full attention to the forthcoming clash against Aston Villa, a fixture that always carries edge, narrative and consequence. Despite a heavy defeat against Arsenal just a few days ago, Villa are one of the Premier League's most structured and confident sides, particularly at this stage of the season, while Forest continue to search for consistency, momentum, and those fine margins that turn decent performances into points. Sean Dyche can't afford for this to become a fourth defeat in a row. And so we'll be breaking down the key tactical battles, the areas where Villa can hurt you, and, just as importantly, where Forest can exploit space, disrupt rhythm, and make this an uncomfortable afternoon for the opposition. Richard Spray, Happy New Year to you, my friend. We are at the time of recording this, because we are putting this out as a pre-record rather than going live, because it is New Year's Day and it's about just gone 4:30 in the afternoon here in the UK, and in Oklahoma, the time, Richard Spray, is
about 20 till 11 in the morning. So yeah, we're a bit slow going this morning. You know, we didn't stay up late. We didn't do the whole festive thing. We just sort of like chilled, vegged out, watched Stranger Things, did the usual stuff that we do as a family, and all went to bed early. So we were a bit boring, but yeah, feeling pretty good today. Feeling pretty rested.
Excellent. We're into 2026 all of a sudden, guys. 2025 was an interesting year. I think by and large, we can be really happy with 2025 as Forest fans because of us getting back into Europe. But things did peter out, certainly, back in the last season. And then this season, it's been that word that I always use, a roller coaster, hasn't it, Rich?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate that we are in Europe. Unfortunate that the expectations became exceedingly high for our club. And then it just seems like with all the turmoil, and we've talked, ad nauseum about this, just the changes, the shift in styles of play, shifts in managerial styles in terms of how they do man management and all of that. And so, yeah, what a crazy season it has been. It's been, I think, tumultuous for each of us individually as fans, trying to find a way to find joy where we can, things like winning against Liverpool and beating Spurs recently. And, but then it's offset by, terrible performance against Everton and not putting in a good performance and kind of capitulating at different moments against teams like Fulham. So, it's typical Forest, right? Up and down, undulation, ebb and flow from an emotional and mental standpoint. But you know what? We wouldn't have it any other way. We love our club dearly, no matter what, right? but yeah, it would be nice to get back into the sort of win column, having lost 3 on the bounce. So looking forward to hopefully getting there. But as you'll see, as we get into some of the information about this matchup, it's going to be challenging. As you said, they're very in form. I think they've won like 11 consecutive Premier matches until they lost against Arsenal. So it's insane form. And they kind of did something similar at the end of last year, this latter half of last year. It kind of really came on and ascended up the table. So
yeah, you're right. I mean, it's funny, this period can really be so crucial. Last year we had a thrilling Christmas. We did that 6 in a row, and December was a really great month for Forest, and we carried that into January slightly as well. We didn't quite tail off in January. We're still kind of going strong, and that really kind of solidified our league position. And it's so true that this December now it's been pretty bad, really, when you look at 3 games in a row of defeats. But it's not that long ago, as you touched on, that we were playing against Spurs at home at the City Ground, and I don't get to go to that many games a season, and that was the last game I went to, and it was absolutely fantastic to be there for that. And I remember the game finished, and I thought, if we can play like this, it shows what quality we've got. I know that Spurs weren't very good that day, but we were really good. And it just showed that we do have good players and we do have a good squad. And Sean Dyche and the team that he's brought in, his staffing team, are doing good things with these players. So the optimism was really high. And everyone was talking about how well Sean Dyche had done since he's come in. Because obviously the Ange Postecoglou experiment was so bad for us and everything else that all Forest fans know about. And so while Sean Dyche wasn't everyone's first choice, a lot of people were willing to say, you know what, so far so good. We were certainly in a much better position than when he first joined us. 3 games later, when you lose 3 in a row, all of a sudden, just in those 3 games, 1 or 2, or maybe even more than 1 or 2, are starting to now think, oh God, Sean Dyche, this is going really bad. Let's get him out. Let's get the 4th manager in. And I just think that that's really, really too knee-jerk a reaction. When we break down the context that Fulham away was a bit of a meh performance, we had a really good performance against Man City and really should have come away with at least a point in that game. We didn't, of course. It's a results industry, Richard. And then, of course, the Everton match where we had so much possession. And as I think I said on the last pod, you just need one of those opportunities, one of those crosses to land in the right area, and you get a goal and you don't concede, and all that possession turns into you winning the game 1-0, and everyone comes away thinking, well, look, we dominated that match. We had so much of the ball, we deserve to win it. But yet again, that's not how it went, and that's not how football works. So can you understand, mate, like some of the natives getting restless about Sean Dyche, or is it just the life of a fickle football fan and social media doing its thing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I would say it's probably the latter. I think invariably, if they gave themselves a moment to just kind of divorce themselves from the emotion of losing 3 in a row, and it's the performance level against Everton, it's that team in particular, just because of the context around it, like we talked about it the other day on the review, just the nature of him understanding how, Dyche understanding how that team works, even if he's not the one coaching it. Moyes isn't that different in terms of how he approaches each individual match, the way that he plays, the style that he plays, the tactics, formation, structure, etc., plus the personnel understanding. And I think it's just the nature of it came across as somewhat stubborn on his part to not want to try to deviate from what was clearly not effective. And so I think that's been some of the MO of him in the past, is he'll want to press high. He'll want his team to be very very fit, which, I mean, I don't think any Premier League manager wouldn't want their players to be fit, but invariably it's about how he uses that fitness. That's a bit of a difficulty at times, and had been initially. I think it's just him coming in with an MO of being very defensively oriented and very specific about how he wants to play. I mean, that was the knock against Ange as well, is not being adaptable. But clearly, you can't change a leopard's spots. He's a all-out attack type of manager, and Dyche isn't quite that way. He's probably a little bit on the other end of the spectrum. And so when you see some of that stubbornness, I think it just compounds it. It just makes it feel like, oh gosh, why can't we just do something else? Because I mean, everybody in the ground and everybody watching on television recognized how poor it was. To your point, I mean, it was just a ton of domination with zero effectiveness in terms of that final ball or that finishing. And so I think it's just it probably, because it's at the halfway point, it's just that cumulative effect of just everything that's happened, and it's being directed at Sean Dyche because he's the guy in front, right, running the ship. And so, but I think when they start to take a step back and like I said, separate from the emotive nature of it, they'll realize, like, there's just no other alternative at this stage. And I mean, he's done a really reasonably good job, considering, yes, the last 3 matches haven't been good, but we've seen Nuno lose 3 matches in a row. We've seen Steve Cooper lose 3 matches in a row, and that's not what we want. And that obviously just puts us more in that relegation space. That makes it that much harder. But thankfully, other clubs around us are not really getting results either. So that's a good thing. But we obviously don't want to rely on that. We want to play our game. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches this match. As we get into our lineup as well. Is he going to change some things up to try to infuse a different dynamic, a different way of attacking a Villa? Because the metrics will tell you, if you play at home, if you're the team playing at home in this matchup, you win. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But I believe he's more I think he understands the psychology of the situation probably better than anyone, and I think he's a little bit more prone to want to try to make adjustments to improve things and get things moving in the right direction and stop the rot, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when Dyche was coming in, I think Danscape was looking at stats and said that you will get a set of fixtures where he'll win maybe 60% of them and he'll get quite a lot of points. And then you might have a run of games where you just looks like you're losing all the time. And it's kind of happening a little bit. And it's disappointing, I think, that because two of those matches in the last three were at Everton and Fulham, and I don't mean that with disrespect towards them, but they're the kind of games where you think, well, look, you know, we can pick points up here. But it didn't happen. So, look, we move on. We are into 2026. And so this year, this half of the season now, my New Year's hope is that, you know, it's the better half, obviously, and that something really tangible starts to happen on the pitch with some of these new signings that we've made in the summer. Igor Jesus has a lot of game time because of obviously the injury to Woods. We've talked about his goal scoring output quite a bit already. We might touch on that a bit more. But we're going to circle back to kind of transfer rumours a bit later on. But let's get into the game against Aston Villa on Saturday. 12:30 kickoff again. I don't know if that suits us or not. I think there's games that we've played at 12:30 and won, and games that we've played at 12:30 and lost this season. So I'm not sure if that's of any benefit. I also wonder what kind of effect the Arsenal result will have on Villa. I mean, literally, the obvious thing is that it could be the start of them hitting a bit of poor form, and maybe they're feeling tiredness, and maybe they're just out of sorts potentially. Or it could be the flip, mate, where they go, you know what, we've lost that game to Arsenal. We're not doing that again. Let's get back onto the winning ways. We've got Forest coming who are struggling. We should be putting them to the sword. So I'm a bit worried about this one. Ollie Watkins, although it was a 4-1 defeat, he got the goal again. He scored twice in the game previously. I think they beat Chelsea, didn't they? They come back to beat Chelsea.
Yeah.
And so he's looking to be back in form a little bit. And you've put together an opposition preview, which we'll get to in just a moment. We'll get to that in just a moment. You're going to kind of give us a closer inspection on the opposition. But what are your general thoughts on the match itself before we get to the opponents per se? I'll mention it now. I mean, he's going to be in the team that we put up later. But 1st of January means Ola Aina is eligible to play again. The squads fall away, everyone. So now the transfer window is open. The 25-man squad is no more at the moment. Aina is eligible to play. I personally would love to see him start. He's been back and fit for a few weeks now. I think he's played a couple of under-21 games, come through those. So he's had time on the grass, albeit at that level. So I'm really keen to get him and that back four that we really trusted so much last season back together. Let's get the gang back together again. Elliot Anderson is an interesting one for me, Rich, because he is clearly a wonderful player. But I'm a bit sick and tired, if I'm honest with you, of seeing after every match, Elliot Anderson is the most forward passes in the final third of a Premier League game with this game week. And Elliot Anderson has made the most recoveries out of any other player in the Premier League this year. All fantastic individual stats, but am I being too greedy wanting more from him? Because, and I know he can't do it on his own, and maybe I'm being a little bit unfair. I just feel like what I'm trying to say is, I don't know, maybe he is great. Don't get me wrong. Forest listeners are probably shouting at me now going, shut up, Greg. But I just feel like the end product hasn't benefited us. He's great at winning the ball back, brilliant. He's great at driving forward. He's great at running the midfield to a certain degree. But we're not getting any end product out of it. He can't finish, save his life. Couldn't finish his dinner. It's another one. So I'm a bit worried that, like, maybe that, you know, we're not using him. Are we using him in the right way, or I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I've made no sense, but I just kind of feel like we need something more from him. Maybe it's the player that he's paired with in the midfield that is the answer. I don't know if that's true or not. So, yeah, my general thoughts are that this is going to be a tough game for us. What are yours?
Yeah, generally, I'll touch on the Anderson thing first. So I would say this. I think his role is sort of probably shifted into something more of what he's doing for England, right? So I think by virtue of the job he's being asked to do, I get where you're coming from because the skill on the ball is elite, right? The ability to pass, you've seen that at moments where he can find a little crease, he can find that small window and put the ball through there. But I don't think because of his role. I mean, look at Caicedo. Caicedo is having a very different year than his normal year from a statistical standpoint as it relates to goal scoring, right? So he scored, I think, 4 or 5 goals this season, and that's never been him. He's one goal, maybe two max. So I think Anderson, I think, had three last season. So my guess is that if the expectation is for him to be the focal point of the attack, that's really not going to be the way his game's going to he's not going to function within in game. I would say that your probably your frustration has more to do with because if you look at England, their 10 play can be very good, right? They have someone who can slot in there and has a lot of creativity and a lot of adeptness as well on the ball where they're able to take players on, they're able to create opportunities and be able to pass the ball very effectively and become sort of an assist engine in that role, whether it be this coming World Cup, which I think we'll all agree Foden's probably the guy, or someone like Bellingham. So they carry the load from the attack standpoint a lot more. Elliott will fill in here and there, and he'll play a little bit high at times, play deep at times. So he can be somewhat of an all-around midfielder in terms of the way his statistics looked last season, and then he's even taken that another level in terms of dueling, to your point, recoveries, interceptions, and all of that. The problem is, I think it's the 10 position we have. That's the issue. You don't have somebody like Morgan who I think his first or second year he hit, I think it was maybe his second year, he hit like 10 assists. He was like in the top 5. And every year since then, he's regressed in terms of that. He had more goals last season, but he had less assists last season. And his second half of the season last year was very poor. Like he really didn't show up until very end of the season. Yeah, I think he had maybe 2 goals, 2 assists, 3 assists, maybe max that second half, whereas he had 5 and 5 the first half. So you really saw a dissipation of his form through that process. That's where I think the problem is, and I'm not trying to be punitive on him and picking on him, but I think Elliott's going to do some things to try to drive things forward as needed, but I just don't think that's really his role. Maybe I'm very wrong in my assessment of that. I'm just basing it off of what I've seen and what I see from his heat maps. The final third is really not his domain as much as that is Morgan's domain from an attacking quote unquote midfield standpoint. So I think that's where he's deferring to him. He's giving the ball to him at times as well. He's trying to link up with Callum. He doesn't really go over to the right all that frequently. If he does, he's in a deeper position. Yes, he's been paired with Sangare, which I think has been a more effective pairing just simply because Luis hasn't as much minutes to develop that synergy with him. It's been good, but not fantastic. I think it's better when Sangare, because he also can do a little bit more work into that final third, and he's a little bit better passer, I think, at this stage of his career than maybe Elliott is. So he's offering something, right? They share the load differently. So I wouldn't be too hard on him. I know you're not trying to be hard on him, but I mean, I wouldn't look at him as being the major issue. I think he's doing his job the way he's supposed to. I just think it's other areas of the pitch where we see it because we just don't see enough consistency. If Hutch is on, maybe Callum isn't. If Callum's on, Hutch is probably average. Morgan is off, which he was considerably in the last match. He was like a less than 6 out of 10, I think, if you look at SofaScore's scoring model. So he was really poor. And when he's been bad, right? I mean, he's doing nothing to affect the game, really. But yet he can pop up and do something like he did against Man City, where he provides that perfect through ball to Jesus, which generates a goal. So general thoughts, I think after that, sorry, that was a long diatribe about players, but in terms of the actual overall thoughts, to your point, I think you can probably make the case that Villa's going to come in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder based off of losing as they did, and they were dominated. But if you like, I was talking to my brother about this, who was just in town recently, and he's a Manchester United fan, and he watched the Manchester United Villa match, and he was saying, Morgan Rogers scored 2 goals, but if you look at outside of those 2 goals, it was kind of similar, and somewhat similar to what we did against Everton. They took their opportunities when given, and they were phenomenal goals. I mean, especially that first one from Morgan Rogers, an absolutely incredible shot in the 18-yard box. He curled into the top right corner of the goal. he's stepping up in key moments, but as a general rule, they don't look like they're dominating teams. And so you can make the case that it's possible that, we come in with lower expectations now after such a poor performance against Everton. Hopefully our heads are not down so much that we're not allowing ourselves to play with any sort of energy and intent and confidence. But I generally believe we might have a good opportunity here to shock them a little bit. And what do? We tend to play up against the better teams. We tend to elevate our game against better teams. And so it is an away match. We'll talk about it here in a second in terms of what that's looked like head to head with them over the last few years in the Premier League. But I do think that we may come in with an opportunity, and not as a free hit sort of approach, but just sort of like, hey, we can do something, because they're going to be expecting us to be, I'm going to call it down tools, but be lacking in belief that we can actually get a result here. And hopefully that works to our advantage. I mean, as we always say, those first 10 to 15 minutes say a lot about how we're going to approach this. And it's always like it has been in years past, get the damn first goal. If we could just get that one right before halftime, sometime in that first 45, and get it to 1-0 at halftime, I think we can see a real shift, and it might it will work to our advantage. We've seen it time and time again, but I definitely think it's possible that we come in with a little bit more of an opportunity to shock them as more of an underdog sort of mentality.
Yeah, I think the way that Villa have been playing has been pretty special. To win all those games in a row, to be talked about as title contenders, albeit not by everybody. They've done remarkably well, considering they started the season poorly. Their manager, Unai Emery, I think, is a very good manager.
Yeah.
He probably became the Arsenal manager at the wrong time. Following Wenger for anybody was always going to be tricky. They were going through transition. And he's the kind of manager, I think, that if he was in the Arsenal hot seat, would definitely make them champions. So still not quite sure they'll do it this season. I think Man City might be there to bite them again. But on Villa, losing 4-1 at the Emirates, and it can happen to any team. I mean, Arsenal are very good, but Villa were without Matty Cash, who has become really important for them again. I think he had a really good spell in the first team, and I think he went through, just looking from the outside in, a period where he was being benched a little bit, not necessarily out of the picture at all, but certainly is back as their first choice right back again without fail. But him missing, I think, against Arsenal was a problem for them. Jadon Sancho started the game for them against Arsenal as well, and he's a player that I think flashes to deceive. I really do. I just don't. I've never really seen what's so special about Jadon Sancho. I think he's stealing a living as a footballer. I really do at the top level. Others might disagree. So they've got players that we know can hurt us. And last season, it was Morato adjusting his shin pad and switching off, and then us getting caught out for Morgan Rogers to score. And he's obviously a big danger man for them. I want us to really be focused on the fact that this could be four defeats in a row. And I know that the players obviously are going to be thinking about all kinds of different things, but I just worry that the fan base can't handle it. Do you know what I mean? I just worry that it's just another thing to beat Sean Dyche about, to beat the club about, to kind of like, I want the new year to bring immediately a feeling that, okay, things aren't that bad and we can really lift ourselves out of this mess. Because I worry that a defeat at Villa starts to stir the pot a bit more. And then we play against West Ham next Tuesday, which already is a must win, Mm-hmm. But if that again doesn't go our way, I'm really, really worried that the unraveling becomes more than just an unraveling. So I think that staying solid and compact might mean that maybe you go to a back three potentially. I mean, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just kind of thinking about how you might then maybe compact the midfield a bit more. Is Dyche that type of manager where he will make those kind of changes? That I don't know. We'll talk more about what team we think it might be, or an idea of a team that Forest put out. but you've come up with the opposition preview, as I previously mentioned. So I'll put that straight on the screen, and I'll make it a bit bigger so that anyone watching can see what you've come up with on Aston Villa.
Great. So working from left to right in the top left corner, for those who aren't watching, it's just basically looking at a Premier League table, and it's kind of looking at some of their form. As I said, you've got Arsenal in first, Manchester City in second, and you've got Villa in third. Villa had won just in the last 5. They'd won 4 prior to losing to Arsenal. But again, as I mentioned, their XG overall, when you we played above our XG last season, so they've been playing above their XG. So the chances they're getting are not looking at from an XG standpoint, looking at credible or solid opportunities to score, but they're getting those goals regardless, because they still have a goal difference of 7. So they're sitting in third. And then if you look at head to head in terms of way that we played them, as I was mentioning earlier, if you typically are the home team, you're winning. So we've played them 6 times. Out of those 6, they've won 3 at home. We've won 2 at home. We've drawn 1 at home. So overall, they've got a better record against us in terms of win-loss. And then obviously the 1 draw. Their overall XG, when you look at how they've been, the opportunities that are coming or the expected goals that are there, they're at a 1.7 XG, whereas we're at a 1.1 XG. So obviously that equates to them winning more matches than we do typically, if you're a big believer in the XG statistic. But I do think there's, like I said, I think at times when we played them, there's maybe one aberration in there. I think we played them in 24 last year. They beat us 4-2. It was kind of a crazy game where they really got up on us quick. And then we had to come back, and I think we got it to 3-2 at one point, and then they ended up scoring another goal in the second half, and then we lost 4-2. But even then, that was probably their most impressive XG performance to date. And that was actually, frankly, our most impressive XG performance against them to date, really. And so that was a bit of an aberration, but for the most part, it's been relatively close. As you stated, against Arsenal, so on the right-hand side here, we've got 3 of the latest lineups from the last 3 matches they played, starting with the most current game against Arsenal. They're really going to feel, they did kind of deviate simply because Cash was out, as you pointed out. He was suspended due to a red card. So Bogard played on the right, but typically they're going to be utilizing Lindelof, and they're going to have Martinez in goal, of course. They're going to have Lindelof on the left center back position, Konsa on the right center back position, and they generally have Maatsen, who's very much a forward advancing type player. He's a decent defender, but he's more of like, I'm going to play more of a wing back role. Dyche can kind of be that way too, and he was in the match in the last match, so they shifted to Dyche. Tielemans is pretty much nailed on in your midfield. You're typically going to have Kamara in your midfield as well. On the right-hand side, from a wing standpoint, you're going to have McGinn. So they typically operate in a 4-2-3-1, by the way. McGinn on the right. Sometimes Tielemans will move into a 10, but oftentimes you might see Rodgers being a 10, or you can see Rodgers out wide, depending on how they want to deploy that personnel and depending on who they have available. But for the most part, that front is going to be somewhat consisting of McGinn, Rodgers, Tielemans at times. Buendia may come in on occasion as well to try to spell and let Rodgers play more of a centralized role, and then you have Buendia on the left. But you're pretty much going to have Watkins as your primary 9. And so that's kind of just how they've set up for the most part. They're playing a very similar formation to us. If you want to move to the next slide, Greg. Looking at their injury situation, so as you pointed out in the last match, Cash didn't play. You had Kamara out as well due to he exceeded the number of yellow cards allowed, so he was out. But both are going to be back for this match. Onana is 25% likely to play in this match, just simply due to a hamstring injury. You've got Ross Barkley out. You've got Gaysand out to AFCON. He's more of a bench player anyway. Pau Torres, who's typically one of their starting center backs, is not playing. That's why Lindelof is playing, but he's also a very stout defender, and he's not going to be playing. Mings is ruled out as well due to a thigh injury. So they've got a little bit of depth issues when they're coming in, but as we've seen, even when we play teams like Fulham or in the last match, it really is irrelevant, right? Because it hasn't impacted the game significantly enough to where we've been able to take advantage of it. So just looking at how they score their goals, ultimately they're going to be focused most on open play, which shouldn't shock you. And even their action zones, primarily they operate within that middle third 41% of the time. That's not articulated on here, but that's just from what I was looking at earlier. But in terms of goals scored, 67% of it's coming from open play. You're going to have to be concerned about the set pieces because you've got 9 of them coming from set pieces, so 30%, and then 1 from an own goal. That's how they've scored their goals. In terms of how they give up goals, open play is a problem for them. That's what's dominating at 57%. Set pieces, they can be vulnerable on set pieces, so that's a good thing to be conscious of, knowing what that's a focal point for Dyche at times. They've given up a penalty, they've given up an own goal. So that's how people are typically scoring against them. As you referenced in terms of danger men, Morgan Rogers is clearly the pivot point, right? So depending on where he plays, it's irrelevant. He's getting the ball. Everything's going to be working through him. He's got 10 goal contributing actions. So that's 7 goals, 3 assists. The next person, Ollie Watkins, as you pointed out, 7 goal contributing actions with 6 goals and 1 assist. But if you just go down through the list, you can see there's a pretty good distribution of how the ball is getting to those players to score, particularly Watkins and Rogers. Buendia has 2 assists, and 4 goals. Daniel Malin, who plays off the bench more often than not, he's got 4 goals and 1 assist. You've got Matty Cash at the right back position doing what he does well, which is getting up to that more into that final third and trying to supplement the wing play and try to provide an outlet for them so he can cross the ball in or he can create problems from that more of a traditional wing back role. He's a good defender too, as we know, because we've seen Matty Cash for years. We know what he's capable of. But as you pointed out, his form kind of dipped and now he's back. But he has 3 goals and 1 assist. Kamara, 1 goal, 3 assists. And then Tielemans with 3 assists, Dini with 3 assists, McGinn with 2. So there's quite a distribution of the goal contributing action metric amongst this team, which is, I think, what makes them difficult to deal with. From an attacking standpoint, everything goes pretty much through the left, which oftentimes is Morgan Rogers either drifting from that centralized position over there to pick up that ball and create problems, or it's going to be through the wing play on the left-hand side, as well as some of the attacking that they do on that left-hand side through Maatsen or Digne when they're playing that left back. But they're still at 32% on the right-hand side too, so it's not a complete departure from trying to create some balance. And then through the middle, about 31%. In terms of where their shots are going to come from, where you're going to want to defend them, 12%, actually a pretty low percentage in the 6-yard box. But a lot happens, and they're good at moving the ball into spaces, as good possession teams can be, like Man City's, like Chelsea's, like those kind of Arsenal. They can be very adept at trying to find those little windows to slot a pass through. We saw that with Garner scoring. We saw that with Reinders when we played Man City, finding that little ball through to that player making a run in that 18-yard box. But then 34% of the time they're going to shoot outside the box, which I think, being that such a high percentage, that probably contributes to the fact that their XG is pretty low, and the fact that they're not going to be a team that scores. They've got a goal difference of 7, right? So they're giving up some goals, but they're not scoring a ton of goals because they're also taking a ton of shots from the outside. So it's something to be cognizant of. And I think when we've been out of possession too, as a team, as you pointed out, even in 4-2-3-1 formation, we've tended to drift into a 4-5-1 kind of approach out of possession. So how we pack that midfield and we create a difficult line to break down is hopefully what we're going to see. So that's just generally an overview of Villa in a nutshell, and we kind of know where those stress points come from, and those primary agents of chaos, if you want to call them that, are coming. It's going to be Rogers and Watkins. That's going to be the focal point.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic, and a really good way for us to get a little bit of a closer look at Aston Villa. Don't forget, guys, that we are sponsored by the Cheese Trader. Stu Freestone is Forest fan, and you can get 10% off any order, not just the first one, any order. Just quote Talking Reds. You can order via email, phone, or Instagram. The information is in the bio to this episode. Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader. I think he's shut up shop for the moment. He's had a very busy December, so I think he's taken a week or so off. So don't forget to put your order in for your next function, maybe a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something similar. All right, back to the football. We know about Ollie Watkins. We know about Morgan Rogers. You've pointed out quite well they're a threat. One player that I think is a really good player is John McGinn. I think he's really effective. He's a good captain. We tried to sign him as well, I think, when we were in the Championship, going back a good few years now. He's been at Villa for a while. It's just that kind of unfashionable, maybe. I think, to be honest with you, I think maybe a lot of teams would like to have a John McGinn in their team. He's good for them. He's good for Scotland. He kind of sticks his butt out a little bit and gets it into places, and he's got a rasping shot as well. So whilst they might not be so prolific from long range, we definitely need to make sure that we're closing him down, because I think he does definitely like to shoot. So he's another player, and Tielemans as well. They have got quality throughout, but so have we. We've got quality as well. I want to see us, I think, doing what we do best, which is soaking up a bit of pressure. It was evident to me that when we played against Everton with all that possession, we just couldn't do anything really with it. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because we just didn't adapt our game enough until it was too late. And we tried crossing lower balls into the box in the last 10, 15 minutes. I think you were talking about that on the last episode. But all those crosses going in, it was just meat and drink for Tarkowski and O'Brien. We didn't adapt our game well enough. There were no kind of 1-2s in and around the box. And that's what I'd want to see. I want to see us kind of going through the middle. If we've got the ball, going through the middle where Morgan and Elliott are kind of linking up in those quick one-touch moves, and Callum coming in, and Amari Hutchinson, who has got clever feet. And I know you're quite a strong advocate for him maybe coming more centrally and being used in a number 10, but he can certainly come in and occupy those spaces in an attack. But everything was just constantly being pushed out to the wings. It became so mechanical. It's like Groundhog Day. As soon as we got the ball, we were kind of we were kind of recycling the ball, and it was going out to the wing all the time. And then if Hutchinson couldn't get a cross in, it would go back to Anderson. It would then go back to Nico, who was playing it right back, and they'd play it inside to Douglas Luiz in the second half, and then he'd find Hutchinson back on the wing, and they played a couple of triangles, come off the wing to go back on the wing to try and get the cross in. And I just thought, this is getting us nowhere. We're better when we soak up pressure, when we sit a bit deeper, when we let the opposition have the ball, and I think that's going to be the way the game unfolds against Villa anyway. I just think that's where we play our best football and how our players operate in the best possible way. And I'm not saying that we should just be a one-trick pony at all. I'm really not. But I think at the moment it calls for it, that we kind of go back to basics a little bit, become really resolute in our defending. We obviously know the midfield is going to be key. And Nana, I think you said he's kind of maybe 50-50 on whether he'll play or not. I think he's a good player as well. It's the kind of game where I really wish Sangare was back available for us. But let's have a think about who might step onto the pitch wearing the away white shirt of Nottingham Forest. He'll be wearing all whites. We put together a Talking Red starting 11, what we would select, or what we think it should be. And we've picked or gone with Matt Sells in goal. Now, John Victor is the man in possession. And if I'm honest with you, I think it's likely that John Victor plays, Richard. I think he's for some reason now occupying the shirt, and Dyche wants to keep him in. And I've mentioned that I don't know if that's because they see Sells maybe leaving the club at some point, whether it's this January or more likely in the summer, or they just want to really mix things up in goal. Sells hasn't been the goalkeeper of last season for sure, but he hasn't made any clangers. Hasn't been really a time when I thought, my God, that was a terrible error. And I just think he's the safer and better goalkeeper of the two. So I would want to see Matt Sells in goal. And then the back four, as I mentioned earlier, I really would love to see Ola Aina back in the starting 11. So for me, he goes into the right back position. Nico, who I think is possibly even better on the left, because he's been playing there so frequently now for Forest that, he's made that position his own. He's been absolutely fantastic, whether he's been playing left or right. He's been so important. He's been playing on 4 yellows for so long as well, and didn't pick up a 5th yellow. And that really should be applauded as well, because it means that he won't serve the suspension now that we've gone past the 19 games. I think the new limit is 10 yellow cards, so he's way off that. But, credit to him for staying disciplined and really being, I would say, alongside Elliot Anderson, our player of the season so far, without a doubt. Miralem Milenkovic, clearly the starting centre-backs for Forest. There's not really anyone that really poses any question, because if they're both fit, they play. And maybe that in itself is a problem. I don't know. I mean, I'm reading that I think AC Milan might be looking at Morato, which is a surprise. Willy Bolly is looking at like he'll leave the club in January, and I think that's the right thing. We need to free up that space. Do we bring another centre half in? I don't know. There's been one or two players mentioned. Stefan De Vrij was a player that was mentioned a while ago as a centre back that Forest might look to turn to. I'm not sure that excuse me. I'm not sure that a centre back is really an area that I'm too worried about. I'm quite happy that if it is Morato staying with Jer Cunha and Zach Abbott, that's enough to back up Murillo and Milenkovic. But we did see that when Murillo was out of action, did we struggle? We've been struggling all season. We weren't necessarily any better or any worse than what we are, I guess. And I was a bit disappointed with the way Murillo got skinned the other night. I mean, James Garner had a fantastic game, but Murillo's passing was a bit off. We mentioned that, didn't we, on the episode? Still a fantastic player, attracting Chelsea's attention and Barcelona's attention. A possible summer departure on the horizon for him. In the midfield, we've gone with Elliot Anderson and Douglas Luiz. Now, the question mark, I suppose, is do you play Dominguez? He started the last couple of games. Douglas Luiz going back to Villa. I think starting him is the right thing to do with Elliot Anderson in this game. Just gives him maybe a bit more guile on the ball, is a little bit more efficient with it in terms of maybe finding the pass that will cause Villa more problems. But I am a huge Nico Dominguez fan. I really, really am. So if he plays, that's fine by me, I guess. But I think Anderson and Luiz for this one. Gibbs White in the 10. We'll talk about him in a minute. Hutchinson has secured that place on the right-hand side. And then the change that we've gone with is Delane Bakwa coming in on the left wing in place of Callum Hudson-Odoi, who, fantastic against Spurs, hasn't been terrible in the last 3 games, but his output hasn't really been there. He definitely was trying very hard in those games. Certainly played well against Man City. I think we all played well against Man City. But maybe it's time now with Bakwa having had a few more minutes that he's introduced from the start. I thought that he was more of a right winger, but I think all these wingers can play left or right, to be honest with you. We saw Hutchinson and Callum switching against Everton for 20 minutes or so, and I think that, that's fine. But Bakwa on the left wing, he was being quite direct with his running when he came on. He had that shot that really he should have scored with. That would have been a nice moment for him. We probably would have still lost the game, but to get him off the mark would have been really good. And then what feels like at the moment like our only secure striking option is Igor Jesus. No one wants to play Taiwo. I mean, he's been really kind of slated. And I feel for Taiwo because he's done great things for us in the Premier League at the start of his Forest career. When I say great, I don't want to get too carried away by saying amazingly great, but his goal has helped keep us up. He made a good impression, a good impact on us when we needed goals. But injuries and form have meant that he's just not the player that we need right now. Cali Mwende clearly not fancied. Clearly not fancied. Chris Wood injured. Igor Jesus obviously has to start. So Sells, Williams, Murillo, Milenkovic, Ola Aina, Anderson, Luiz, Bakwa, Gibbs White, Hutchinson, Jesus. Richard, Morgan Gibbs White, you've been probably his biggest fan all the time I've known you, but his halo has started to slip a little bit, hasn't it? If he's been playing that poorly at times, does that say a lot about how James McAtee isn't trusted to even kind of like last 10 minutes? Morgan's having a stinker, get McAtee on. It hasn't happened at all. Are we relying more on Gibbs White than we've ever relied? And just what is it about him that's made him look a shadow of the play he was last season?
I think some of it is you can see a concerted effort for him to, whether that's listening to noise that comes from the outside, whether that's been other managers trying to drill it into him. You need to be a little bit more controlled, because when you find your moments and you're judicious about doing those sort of trick that, employing that trickery, it maybe works a little bit better. I mean, we saw it on full display as it relates to the Brentford match, for example. He and Elliot Anderson's connection in that match was elite. But I think the difference is, just getting back to something you talked about a minute ago. I think Jamie Tatler was the one who put this in our group. There was zero movement. It was just a lot of tapping the ball around. And I think he's just doing a lot of that too. I think he's trying to not be as risky with the ball. I think he's trying very hard to limit those kinds of turnovers and that kind of scrutiny that comes from to him. And sometimes when you have players that are can be that have that sort of edge to them, and they have that sort of like, in American football, we call it for quarterbacks gunslinger mentality, right? Where you kind of fit things into tight windows, and you try to take risks and things like that. And sometimes what that results in is something that looks really annoying and frustrating, and can create some problems going the other direction, especially if a team's good on the counter and we're playing up high and we're allowing ourselves to have limited, bodies behind. We've seen goals like that happen too, where either him or Elliot maybe give the ball away in an area and then they just go straight on the counter, and it creates issues. And then we've got, like I said, we put Milenkovic or Murillo in a compromised position because they're trying to defend against two or three players. So maybe he's just trying to be he's gotten in too much in his head and trying to be too much of a guy who's just very, very passive in terms of the way he plays, as opposed to being a little bit more aggressive in the way he plays. But I almost, in a way, it sounds weird because of how frustrating it is at times when he gives the ball away. I almost want him to get back to that. Just play loose, play it, enjoy what you're doing. Because I don't think he's enjoying it. In that last match, I made the comment that he kind of looked like a petulant child. He committed a foul late in the game and he kicked the air. I mean, it wasn't just like, like pounding his fist or doing something somewhat was showing frustration, but I mean, he was straight up like, I'm just going to kick it, something, and look really pissed off. And his body language isn't great. He got frustrated with Nico Williams for not passing a ball and taking a shot, which frankly was the best shot I think I'd seen from our team last match. But it was like, what is he going to do? Pass the ball again in the air and nobody get on the end of it? I mean, it just seemed like he's not right in the right headspace. And I think what that's doing is it's manifesting into him just not being the kind of player that we know he's capable of. And I think that's the frustrating part, is you've seen what he's capable of in the Premier League, right? On a team that's struggling. So where is that? And we know the statistics will back it up. When he's at his best, the team wins games and they are competitive. Right. And that's the key point, because he is that supposed to be that engine, and he's not that person right now. And he hasn't been for the most of the season. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about him in that regard, but I don't know what it would take to, maybe he just needs a change of scenery. And honestly, a summer move for him would be advisable, because it may not be the lucrative, outcome that we had hoped when we were going to potentially sell him last off season. But I think he may need a change of scenery. He may need to get back to feeling like, okay, a refresh, a restart is of good for. But to your point, I don't know what to say about McAtee. That's why I say I think Amari's played that role for Ipswich at times. We all know what he can do on the ball. If you put him in that role with a little bit more creativity, a little bit more gravitas, and put Bakwa and Showa on the wings, could we have something there that maybe sparks something? I don't know, but is that too experimental? I don't know. That's for a manager to decide. But I don't think it's as crazy of an idea as maybe what we've proposed in the past, like playing Murillo at left back or something. It's probably a little bit more. It has a little bit more sanity attached to it than maybe playing Murillo really out of position. But ultimately, I think that's been the crucial thing that's missing, the ingredient that's missing, because when the assists weren't there from Alanga, and he really took over as that guy to feed that Chris Wood last year, whereas Morgan was kind of more of that guy at times for the entire team from a distribution standpoint. He became the man to do that, and he found his role, and it really created a lot of great outcomes and results for us, and we're really sorely missing that. Hopefully that's what Hutchinson can do, but he, like you point out, he's going to get doubled on that wing. They're going to restrict his space and his movement, and unfortunately, his only option is to pass it back to Nico. And as we saw last match, it was pretty ineffective because there was no there's nothing on the end of it really. It just manifests into sort of wasted possession. So,
what about you? You just quickly before we wrap up, would you have Sells back in goal? Were you happy with Victor?
Yeah.
Are you happy with Aina coming straight back in, or do you think he needs to be introduced off the bench? All those kind of things. Do you think Dominguez should play? Do you think if Dan and Doy's fit, he comes back into the side? Anyone that we've not talked about that you kind of feel actually no, he deserves a mention?
I think Sells is a good call. I think what worried me a little bit in the last one was it felt like, you know, we've seen some parries that have come off of his hands against lesser competition. I don't think, at least from what evidence we have in front of us, I'd have to go back to the Club World Cup or previous matches, but again, it's a different league playing for Botafogo. He just didn't look. I think Sells is a better shot stopper, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. I think he may not command the box the same way. He doesn't have the same height and physical presence that, you know, that John Victor has, but I almost would rather in these situations, because yes, we've had moments where we've been frail on the set piece side of things, but it felt like in these last few matches, what we needed was somebody. I mean, the ball through his legs, you know, which can happen, you know, from Reinders, Cherokee. I mean, just the awareness was lacking. Yes, Morgan was kind of shielding that shot, so it was difficult. But I just haven't seen enough shot stopping capability. There was one I think he did against Man City, which was really good, where he kicked it away. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, he hasn't had a whole lot to do. But I've always felt like when you needed Sells to secure you a point, or to secure you 3 points, or to secure you a clean sheet, he always seemed to come through in that moment. And that's the kind of, I think, what we need right now is we need that little bit of that dynamic to kind of be reinserted to try to provide confidence to those players that this guy can stop shots, right? Yeah, like I said, he may not be the greatest on set pieces. We saw that when a ball came in and it literally went over his hands into the goal from a corner. But he definitely struggles there. But I think he offers other things. In terms of Aina, I think absolutely, because you know what you get with him and the kind of what he provides and the kind of confidence he breeds in terms of having both sides of the pitch feel like it's balanced, right? You have two players who can bomb forward and they can create problems from that perspective, who have good cohesion with the wing play. I mean, he's got to build that up with Hutchinson, obviously, but his ability to defend one-on-one has always been really good. His pace is really good. He's just so silky smooth in terms of how he can take players on, and he can dribble, get around players, create opportunities for other players. That's the kind of thing we need, right? Because if it's not coming from the centralized location in Gibbs White, for example, and as you said, Anderson's not doing it all the time because he's doing a different role. Where is it going to come from? And I think by allowing them, and he and Nico can both invert and overlap very effectively. So I think we need a little bit of that back, and just his energy and his positivity and the way that he can help lift players up. You know, we've certainly seen him at times not play well and his head be down a little bit, but that's few and far between in my mind. That's typically not his MO. I think getting him back on the pitch and creating that positivity again, where he can kind of clap the boys and get them going, right? Because that's what you've always said is something that like Yates will do, right? He's the kind of guy to do that kind of thing. So bringing a player like that on to me is incredible. Because in the past, I mean, you could legitimately say, all things, you know, being different, he could be a captain. He's got that kind of leadership capability. And so bringing that back on the pitch and that veteran presence to me will be a value, because we've seen Savona play well, but he's definitely been vulnerable at different points. But yeah, I don't see anybody else like Ndoye. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I just think whether it's injury or something, I mean, I think it's going to be a while. And as those wing players start playing better and better and better, it's really going to keep him on that second level of the depth chart. I just don't see how he breaks back in the team unless there's an injury.
Okay. So we'll come back to get some score predictions in just a moment. But the January window is open. And of course, that brings rumours galore. And the way we've been playing and the players that have been injured and missing or not performing, you know, I think Forest fans have probably got more of an eye on the transfer window now than they perhaps wanted to have. I think every time a transfer window comes around, because we've been so active in every window since we've been back in the Premier League, people are almost kind of getting a bit fatigued by it, thinking, let's just have a quiet one. Because if you have a quiet one, it almost feels like everything's okay. And actually, if you make lots of changes, it's almost like a sign that says, yeah, we're in the shit. We need to kind of mix this up a little bit. But we need a striker. And so the breaking news yesterday was that Strand Larsen of Wolverhampton Wanderers has been linked with Nottingham Forest. He's been linked with West Ham as well, maybe one or two others. He's a player that I mentioned in the summer as a player I liked when we're looking at striker targets, but it seemed unlikely because he had been on loan at Wolves last season and only made it permanent in the summer. So it was probably a little bit adventurous to say, well, let's buy him off Wolves when they were just buying him. Albeit Newcastle did try and do that. When they lost Isak, they were scouting around trying to find a replacement. And they went after Strand Larsen and offered something like 50 to 55 million and got turned down. So, of course, we know how football can change very, very quickly. He's not necessarily a player that's out of favour. It's just Wolves now probably are resigned to the fact that, look, we're going down. And so maybe it's about making the sale now rather than leaving it and so on. And maybe it's an area we can capitalise. So I'm not quite sure what the figure would be. Some are saying 30 million, 35, which I still think is quite high. He's only got one goal, I think, this season, but then that is a Wolves team that have been struggling. I remember when we played him last season, or played Wolves last season, he missed 2 sitters, I think it was. One was a header. But, you know, I'm not going to judge him on that performance alone. I still liked him and thought, you know what, he's getting in the right positions. And he's in that mould, isn't he? He's in that mould of a big striker up front, a target man, if you like, an old-fashioned target man. So he's kind of got Sean Dyche written all over him. Any legs in this, do you think, Richard, or do you think maybe there's a bit of paper talk going on? I mean, I definitely wouldn't want him to go to West Ham because that would be strengthening them. And we definitely need a striker. And again, rather flippantly, I was talking about Sam Surridge the other day. I think the romance of that is kind of getting carried away. But, you know, the MLS is a much more... it's a lower level, isn't it, than the Premier League? That's what I'm saying. So scoring goals at that league is fine, but that doesn't necessarily translate that you're going to do it back in the Premier League. But we need maybe somebody tried and tested, so he's got that experience. Is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down for you on Strand Larsen?
You know, he's never been. I mean, he definitely had the Wood sort of mold about him. Just the way he plays is very similar. Profile speaking, archetype speaking, it definitely makes sense. To your point about target man, is there something that he can potentially do that offers a little bit? While we've seen Jesus be pretty good from an aerial standpoint, it's just not happened. It's not manifest itself into enough goals within the Premier League. And clearly it's a very physical league, as we've all stated, you know, time and time again. I think the price point is is most concerning to me. There's something about a player who's shown, you know, the ability to score double-digit goals. I mean, he had 13 at Celta Vigo, and then he had 14 last season, and he had a few assists as well. To your point, I mean, but even Woods missed sitters, right? Last season, he's done things like that, so you can't hold that too much against him. But on a poor Wolves team, I mean, I'm sure right now it's just it's a holistic problem, right? Where they're not doing enough as a team to really create anything that puts them in a competitive position to win games, get results, all of that. So maybe a change of scenery for him, a guy who's only 25 years old, so he's got plenty of football left in front of him. If you're able to get him for 30, I mean, maybe clearly I don't have the innate and or detailed understanding of where we are at. I mean, I think Raf's saying we're going to be about 28 million short of our expected loss in order to stay within PSR, you know, boundaries. But, you know, we know we're going to have to sell a couple of players probably before June 30th anyway. Do you roll the dice and say, you know what, I feel like I'm going to get a good return on my investment with Elliot Anderson and probably potentially with Morgan Gibbs-White, potentially with Murillo. I think Murillo and Anderson seems like the most likely candidates to go in the summer right away. And if that's the case, maybe I can bring a guy like this in because it's the goals aren't coming. And so if you're going to try to find a way to feed the ball in the box, that's the kind of player you want to be hitting crosses to, right? That's not the player that you want to play on the ground. Whereas I think Jesus is kind of somewhere in between, right? So I would say he's a good choice in my mind because, as you point, he's battle tested in the Premier League. He's shown the ability to score goals on a poor side, and we need to do something. It has to be changed up because we just don't want to get in this wash, rinse, repeat scenario and think that things are suddenly going to shift and the quality of players is just going to magically appear. So I don't think it's a bad call, honestly, Greg. I think we were both on the same level thing. Like, he'd be a really good person to kind of come in, spell and share time with Wood and then eventually take over for him. Or he may be able to do something similar now because we just don't know when Woody's going to be back. And we just don't know if Jesus will manifest himself into being that true Premier League striker. Maybe he's a really good number 2 in that behind someone like Strand Larsen. So I would be all for it. I think if it's around 30, you know, That would be fantastic.
It's about workload, sharing the
Yeah.
workload. At the moment, Igor Jesus is sharing the workload with the Taiwo Awoniyi, who doesn't really do it for us.
No.
Calimuendo's not getting any minutes. Obviously, we still have Europe to think about. Igor Jesus has performed in Europe, and so has Calimuendo. So, I just think sharing the workload, making sure we've got a capable centre forward for the Premier League is crucial this January. I think we'll wrap things up there. We will do January transfers and rumours on an episode soon. We might be doing a dedicated episode on that, where we might get some Q&A going on as well, get some questions from people focusing on the ingoings and outgoings and that kind of stuff. So there's James McAtee to talk about, Taiwo, Calimuendo, and others as well. All right. It's nice to do a pod with just us two. We haven't done it for a while. We do value all of our contributors who come on and share their thoughts on Forest. So again, I'll say it here. Thanks to all of those guys. But to share this episode with just you, buddy, has been a real joy. What's your score prediction for the game against Aston Villa?
The XG has said it's typically about a 2-1. So unfortunately in favor of the home team. So I don't typically do this. You know me, Greg. We tend to be more on the optimistic side of things, but I would hope for a 1-1. I think we're going to get a 2-1 loss here. Because as I said, they don't create a ton of chances, but when they do, they're clinical about it. So I'll go 2-1 to Villa.
Okay. I think you could be onto something there for sure. But Forest away, at Liverpool, not just this season, but last season, and also other venues as well. Playing those teams that are the so-called really good big teams in the league, I think that suits us. I do think we'll sit in more. I do think we'll have less possession again, and that again will be us countering and springing traps, hopefully. I'm going to go to 1-1. I'll say a 1-1 draw because I think that is more likely. Clearly, I want to win. My fantasy is a 3-0 win. That we do something to Aston Villa like we did to Liverpool, and to Spurs at home. Because sometimes when it clicks, it really clicks. And so my fantasy result is a 3-0 win for Forest. Villa have a hangover still from the Arsenal defeat. Forest click back into gear, and everything goes hunky dory, and we get a 3-0 win. My realistic is a 1-1 draw. There we go. All right, we're going to wrap things up there. Want to say again to all of you a very, very happy new year. 2026 has to be a great year for Forest, I think. I've got one eye on May, Istanbul. That to me is going to be possibly the highlight of the year. I've been harping on since the start of the season. I'd take 17th in a Europa League win, Champions League, Europa League win, and it possibly might come to pass. So watch this space. But all eyes are on Villa Park on Saturday as Forest look to get back to winning ways against Aston Villa. And we'll see you soon. Take care.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.